Crews 10 days to clean up the problems of Floyd in 1999. And Dan, this time already this storm, Isabel, has left twice as many people in the dark.
Or battered the western panhandle. But coastal devastation came not as much from the wind as from 30 to 40-foot waves that tumbled structures and destroyed beaches.
Rooftops being ripped off their homes, trying to seek any shelter they can get. Other folks about a mile inland we've heard from have about 7 feet of water in some of their homes. Of course, it's a very low-lying area here, and they're having to retreat to the second story from the storm surge flooding. We've heard Highway 90 has probably 7 to 10 feet of water on it.
Transmitting up to where it was possible. Things got really, really bad here, so we had to cut off our transmission. Our backup system went down, and things are really, really serious here in Corozal.
The Vero Beach, Florida.
It's like an unwanted guest who showed up and now won't leave. This tropical storm has dumped a tremendous amount of rain on the state. In some spots, 14 inches, which has caused flooding.
Wind, you know?
Oh, wow.
Oh, and I'm finally scared, you know. I'm getting scared now because the wind's coming so heavy.
Well, you don't need to be scared. If I was,
Okay.
don't be scared.
Yeah, it's trembling the window, you know. The door.
Been taking a beating from Hurricane Irene for the last 2 months outflowing. There is a lot of reports of down trees and being blocked, blocking highways here on the island.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another Hurricane Season 2012 Kickoff Show. I'm Jim Williams. We're here with Bill Phillips in the studio, and if you're wondering what the bag is over here, this is payback, baby. Payback. The Miami Heat defeated the Indiana Pacers. And Bill was insisting that somehow or miraculously the Indiana Pacers were going to be able to beat the Miami Heat in the second round playoffs there. That just didn't happen. And as he said, if they don't win this series, I'll wear a bag over my head on the Hurricane Season Kickoff Show. So, Pacers suck. And that's it. Now, for the next 5 minutes, he's got to suffer with that on. I'm sorry. It might even extend to 10, depending on any verbiage that comes out of him in the meantime. But, so are you admitting now that the Heat is a better basketball team? I mean, really, you were really entertaining that thought? That the Pacers were better?
For this particular season, Pacers suck, Heat rule.
All right, well, all right. We'll see. Right now, Heat are up 2-0 against the Boston Celtics. We'll see what happens tonight.
That should be a sweep.
Next game is coming up later on this evening. All right, we are going to talk tonight about the new changes at Hurricane City, one of which is right behind us here, the new studio that Bill and I have been setting up for the past several days. This is usually I do the shows down in Delray Beach, and this year I'm up in Virginia Beach for the show. We have we have lighting down here. It's kind of crazy the way we have this set up here tonight, but this isn't really for live broadcasting studio kind of stuff. This setup back here is for Bill being able to do the live broadcasts because I'm going to be mobile this year if any hurricanes hit. And when I say mobile, I'm talking southeastern United States. We're talking probably Alabama, all throughout the state of Florida, up into South Carolina. We're not going to go to North Carolina or over into Louisiana or Texas or anything like that. So if any hurricanes hit the southeast, we have not only a live cam that I'll be bringing with me and streaming on Ustream, but we'll also have a remote beach-located IP cam that's going to be streaming live, and Bill's going to be bringing that cam up along with my cam on the live stream at hurricanecity.tv. So we're looking forward to that. Now this is all experimental. There's no guarantees on anything. I have a box that's built. I was going to show pictures of that, but we've been so busy setting this network up, I really haven't had time to get all the photos ready for the show tonight. But
there's also scheduling conflicts that go into that. I mean, there's a lot of experimental and a lot of work that's going to go involved in this. I mean, a lot of things have to go right for this to work.
Yeah, and yeah, it's completely experimental this first year we're doing this. I know a lot of you are saying, well, you're copycatting Mark Sudduth and all this. You know, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com has been doing this for years. But here's the problem, and this has been a big issue over the years. I love Mark Sudduth. We work together. We're friends. I love all the other chasers out there. I love what they do. But the problem is it's really hard to get information out of these guys when there's a hurricane hidden. They'll occasionally call in, or I'll occasionally get them on the phone, but it's Bill will tell you it's like a nightmare getting live information during hurricanes. So the best way to do this is really me being out there in the storm. I'll know exactly where to get to be in the center of that storm or where the highest winds are in the northern portion of that hurricane. And Bill will be able to stream not only my dashboard cam and the IP cam, but also the other chasers' cams. It'll be like a complete smorgasbord of live video coming in from the scene where the hurricane is.
And more feeds than one up on... I can't see it right now. Sorry.
Suffer for the next 2 minutes. I don't care.
I know you don't. But no, in all seriousness, this is about... If everything works, we'll be able to, with the new producer that we're now using at Ustream, I should be able to show you more than one live video feed at once on the live stream, meaning probably up to 3 feeds at once, meaning not only for example, the IP cam, Jim's dashboard cam, and maybe a radar all at once. So you're always getting the full 360-degree angle as much as possible. I mean, it's really going to be amazing if this works.
Yeah, and it takes teamwork, and that's why I came up here, because right behind me here is this nice studio that I said. Now, I did this a few years back for Bill. We came up here and took what he had at the time and turned it into a nice studio that was over there in the corner. And what I've done is shifted everything down here in between these two windows, and this way it allows the big screen monitor behind me here to be used. And you know, with Bill's disability, it's lots of HTML and all the editing that's required. He needs to see everything large. So this monitor up is going to allow everything to be seen large, and the computer off to my right over here, he'll be able to capture that computer, whatever's coming through, whether it's the IP cam or my dashboard cam. And then over here, he'll be able to pull in another feed on that particular computer just by clicking one of the tabs. There'll be a bunch of thumbnails up on this monitor here on the producer, and he can choose whatever cam he wants to go with. It might be 10 cams, there might be 2, but he'll be able to choose whatever source he wants to go live with while I'm out in the field.
And in fairness, ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be you're not seeing a new computer that's going to be added to this network over the next couple of days. We just didn't have time to get it today. So you're not seeing the full thing, but we'll have photos up on the About page at Hurricane City if you want to see the complete setup here when Jim gets back.
Yeah, I'll get all the pictures. Oh, by the way, this show is being archived for archive subscribers, and that will not be available till the 5th when I get back into South Florida to upload that, because I have to edit it a little bit and change it to a different type of an FLV file. So archive subscribers, you just have to hang tight. If you're unable to watch the entire show tonight, see all the pics and everything, just check back on the 5th for the complete archive. This show should last about an hour and a half tonight. So here's what the itinerary is for tonight. I want to show you a few new things at Hurricane City if you haven't already been alerted about it on the tropical update videos. There's a lot of new features at Hurricane City. I want to go over that. Then I'm going to get into my top 20 cities and islands I think are going to be affected. Bag's got to stay on your head for another minute, buddy. And then
I haven't said a word.
Suffer.
I haven't said a word.
And then it's probably in there suffocating. I should have put some duct tape down here and just like force it on your head the entire thing. So, all right. Anyway,
this is nothing, ladies and gentlemen, compared to the chicken suit a few years back.
Well,
this is nothing.
That was a train wreck. Anyway, the top 20 picks. My top 5. I'm really concerned this year. There's one area that's really freaking me out this year. If you're in that area, I'm telling you, just hang tight for the top 5, which will be coming up shortly. Also, then we're going to take your phone calls. We're going to try to take a phone call in this area up to the speakerphone, and we're going to have the email address open up as well. Bill will be handling the emails tonight, And any calls that come in, we'll be able to patch you through. We're going to give away a few laminated hurricane tracking charts tonight, courtesy of maptracks.com, and a couple of Hurricane City T-shirts to some callers and emailers. So hang tight for that. We got a long show tonight. All right, Bill, you can go ahead and take the bag off your head. Enough of that. I'd like to keep this up here for a display, though. Pacers suck. For another...
Hey, that wasn't the agreement.
For another... No, we got to get rid of it. I don't want to torture you any more than that. Goodbye. All right, point made. Heat's winning the championship. They might have to struggle through maybe one of the teams out west. We'll see what happens. All right, anyway, let's get to the new changes at Hurricane City. Chris from TropicalAtlantic.com has kicked ass this year in the offseason, man, really writing some scripts and cleaning up some of the HTML at Hurricane City. So let me go ahead and show you some of the changes at Hurricane City. I don't have the telestrator tonight, but it will just kind of basically, of course, the models are gone off the map because we had Burl out. Though, speaking of Burl, before we want to get to that, 2 named storms already. Last time it happened was what?
1908.
1908. We had, in fact, this is the strongest, not only that, but this is the strongest system to make landfall in the United States before the hurricane season starts.
Correct.
Starts 70 miles per hour for Jacksonville, Florida. And even though I don't think those winds were 70 at landfall, I mean, honest to God, those winds were just...
They might have been about 50, if that.
Yeah, I mean, we had some gusts to 60 in Jacksonville, like in the open areas of the beaches and stuff. I doubt seriously if this was a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm. You know, we could go round and round about that, about the hurricane hunters and what they find out in these systems, Bill. I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, we say you got to deduct like 20 miles an hour. Really.
Remember, they're looking for this... As they're flying around, they're looking for the one isolated cell that might have that 70-mile-per-hour wind gust, and then they base it off of that for the entire core of the storm. And I really feel that method is flawed. I don't want to slam anybody. That's just my personal opinion, and that's it on that topic.
All right, let's go ahead and go to the. Hurricane City front page and show you some of the new features at Hurricane City this year. And again, Chris from Tropical Atlantic's really been working hard to get some stuff implemented here. And so let's go ahead and bring up Hurricane City. I thought I had that. Okay. Let me load Hurricane City. I thought I had it loaded here. Okay.
You got it now.
There we go. Now, this is a screen capture, so you're not going to see the text that well, but basically everything, the layout of the site is basically the same. Here's the new feature, the hurricane tracking chart right in the center of the page. Now, this is all GIS mapping, and when there's a invest out there, you'll have 2 models, the LBAR and the BAMM model, show up on the map. And then 24 hours later, once we start getting some model data in, the 5 best performing models based on 24-hour increments will be displayed on the map. And the number 1 being the red-colored model, and number 5 being the aqua-colored model, and all the models in between. You can click on each model on the map, and then get the actual information as to which model it is, and what. Sometimes it even shows you what the expected miles per hour is down the road. But the cone of air shows up on here as well, and then when you click on the sea surface temperature link on here, it takes you to the actual ocean temperatures. And with the thing about these maps, the more you zoom in on these maps, the more details that become available on the map, such as detailed sea surface temperatures. You have temperatures, I repeated that already, the temperatures, and we have the barometric pressure shows up on the maps.
And ladies and gentlemen, with it being nighttime, at night, the sea surface temperatures may not display at nighttime. We have no idea why that occurs, but at night, it may not display the night. That's why you may see just the regular map right now.
Yeah, and by the way, that cone up there is a layer in the map that I may have to remove that unless it disappears on its own. And here it is on the actual satellite radar overlay, showing the track of Burl, and how it went north and then zigzagged to the southwest to Jacksonville and then went out to sea after skirting the southeastern coastline. But when you zoom these maps, I mean, it's amazing the amount of data that becomes available on these maps. In fact, I'm zooming in right now, and bringing it over to the United States, and you can see what's available. Like, for example, if you zoom into Florida, you get the close-up radar and the actual temperatures. You got 10, 12, 10, 13 millibar pressures in South Florida right now, and a pretty good line of thunderstorms right off the coast.
Buoy data as well.
Okay, it's having trouble zooming in right now. It's kind of locked up, but basically you get the pressures and the temperatures and the zoomed in. And any advisories that are out there, such as severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, there'll be boxes that pop up on the screen, and you simply click on the box and it'll bring you up the advisory, and you can scroll through it. So it's a real handy feature to have.
Good.
The nicest feature, I think, is the ability to you know what? We don't have the Java on this machine yet. Forgot to load that on here. We have all new computers set up here, but the actual European model will be displayed by clicking the European model in the left-hand navigation bar next to the tracking map, and that'll bring up the animation of the European model in the same frame as the tracking map. And the good thing about that is, you don't have to go to another page and go to the European model page to open up the model. Just click on it right there on the front page of Hurricane City, and it opens up nice, and it fits snugly right inside that frame. And what happened here? No, we're still live. All right. I just bumped the mouse on that. All right. So that's about it. And we have all the mouse over models are still available by clicking the thumbnails below the tracking chart. You can get the old tracking map by clicking the main map link over here, and that pulls up the tracking map from last year that we were using for many years, with the ship and buoy data on it. And the advisory box down here. Now, right now we're on the tropical weather outlook, and when there's a discussion or information on a specific storm, that'll be listed here, and then you'll be able to click it, and it opens up in the same window. Last year it opened up in a different window. So everything's pretty much consolidated at Hurricane City. Hope you enjoyed the new layout. We're working on the HTML. If for any reason you're surfing around Hurricane City and the menus don't work or the images don't work, first of all, you need Java. You need the latest Flash player, and you need to hit the compatibility button at the top of the site if you're using at the top of the browser. If you're using, what is it, IE7 and
IE7, IE8, IE9. Make sure compatibility view is enabled.
Right, and now I prefer Firefox. That's the best way to view Hurricane City is via Firefox. Or Safari, one of the alternative browsers to IE, because IE is just kind of really buggy, and even Chris doesn't like it. Sometimes the maps shrink automatically and stuff like that. By the way, if that ever happens where the tracking map shrinks, just go and click one of the links below the tracking map, and it'll go full screen again. It's one of these experimental things. There's a lot of layers on these maps, so they can be a little buggy at times, but it's not going to affect your computer at all. It's just, it's just sometimes it just happens. This is the way IE works. But I prefer Firefox. That's the best way to view the site. So, anyway, that's about it. I want to thank my sponsors, by the way, in the right-hand navigation bar, Starseal of Florida, Maptracks.com, and the HurTrack program for the support using the program throughout the hurricane season, giving you all the latest information via the HurTrack program. So, with that said, let's go ahead and start with my city picks and get right to it. First of all, this is the ticking time bomb on my list this year. And let me get my notes handy here. My ticking time bomb is the ABC Islands. These are the islands down just north of South America. This area hardly ever gets hit. But the thing about these islands are that when they get hit, it takes a long time in between hurricane hits. It's a long time for tropical storms to hit the area, not to mention hurricanes. Now, hurricanes are like once every 10 or 15 years they get a hurricane down there that comes within 60 miles. It's probably one of the least affected areas in the Atlantic Basin, but right now they're 29 years overdue for a direct hit from a hurricane. So that's really phenomenal amount of time that an area has been not hit by when it's supposed to be hit by a hurricane. Now, honorable mentions before we get to the top 20 are Ponce, Puerto Rico. That's on the southern coast of Puerto Rico. They get hit when there's an average of 9.73 named storms. Chokoloskee, Florida. Jacksonville, Florida, was already been affected this year. Kingston, Jamaica, Cocoa Beach, and Daytona Beach, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, are all honorable mentions that almost made the top 20 but didn't quite make it. Now, let me give you my criteria for my top 20 this year. And I'm basing this on an average of 11.52 named storms. Now, all the predictors have come out with their seasonal amounts of named storms they expect to hit this year. Not to hit, but total storms in the Atlantic Basin. We have, I think Dr. Gray is predicting, Bill, you might have more information on that, though. You remember what Dr. Gray's predictions are on this?
Dr. Gray, somewhere between, I think, 10 to 13 and
well, I think
three majors.
And I know NOAA is at I think like some ridiculous. NOAA is kind of ridiculous. They're like 11 to 15 named storms. Like that's kind of a big mulligan there. They're giving themselves for the amount of named storms. Like
it's kind of hedging your bets. I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's just like, well, it could be 0 or it could be 20. I mean, that's a pretty good call, right?
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I'm basing it on about 12 named storms. Now, we've already had 2, and this is where the problem exists, because I know when these guys made their predictions, they were not considering we're going to have 2 preseason storms. And that creates a whole problem of the whole number scheme, because I was basing it on 12 for the entire season, from June 1st to November 30th. And now we have to add 2 more because we had 2 unexpected ones at the beginning. So really it should be 14. So it's completely thrown my numbers off. But I'm going to go ahead because I predicted these locations about a month ago before we had these named storms. So, I mean, it is what I just have to eat it, and it is what it is. But I still feel confident of my top picks this year. And but I'm still basing it on 12 named storms during the regular season. So 12 named storms during the regular season, meaning we should end up with 14 named storms, but 12 storms from here on out. And what I do is one of my predictors is going back and looking at all the years where we've had landfalls when there's been around 12 or give or take named storms in the Atlantic Basin. And analog years for those years are 1952, 1953, 1958, 1964, 1976, 1977, 1980, 1993, 2003, 2007, and 2010. And if you average out those years, it comes out to 11.52 named storms. That's what I'm basing it on. Really, the other reason I came up with that number of 12 named storms this year is because I feel like it's going to be somewhat of an El Nino year. Now, they're calling for El Nino to peak out right at the middle to the late part of the hurricane season, and then it'll pretty much be level out after that. So the peak of the warming of the Pacific waters is going to happen right around the height of the hurricane season, which might lower the numbers, cause a little more wind shear in the Atlantic Basin, plus the fact that there's cooler than normal sea surface temperatures, and the pressures are kind of high in the Atlantic this year as well, and that would mean we're going to have a little bit smaller hurricanes and less amounts of hurricanes. But in years like this, you tend to also have 1 or 2 very intense extreme hurricanes, and that's my concern going into this hurricane season, is the extreme hurricane scenario. So based on that, normally for a 12 named storm season, in years past we may have missed several. Like in those years that I mentioned where I thought they were similar years, there could have been 14 named storms. There could have been maybe 10 named storms those years, but I upped it to 12 because many years in the past they may have missed 1 or 2 storms out in the open Atlantic. So considering we're going to have similar years to those type of years where the El Nino was about 1 degree above normal, those years I read to you, again, 1952, 53, 58, 64, 76, 77, 1980, 1993, 2003, 2007, and 2010 were all years when the El Nino was about 1 degree above normal temperatures in the East Pacific, which causes wind shear in the Atlantic. And I took 2 named storms off of my thinking based on the fact that we may have had more storms in history that were roaming around out there that were not counted. So I'm basing it on 12 named storms. That's how I came up with my scenario of 12 named storms. And there are certain areas that are more vulnerable when there are 12 named storms.
Some notable storms in those years, these analog years that you mentioned that are notable. 2003 we had Isabel affect my region. 2007 You had Dean and Felix in the Caribbean. 2010. Do we have anything in 2010? No. Oh no.
No, just Bonnie.
Bonnie. That's it. But my point for saying that is you can have very intense storms during those years. I just mentioned three storms that I believe were all major. If I'd have to go back and look at the history, but all three of those storms were major that I mentioned. So it can't. Numbers don't always matter. It only takes one. Remember that. Prepare every year. Don't always worry about the numbers. Be prepared. You don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know where these storms are going to go once they form. Go ahead, Jim.
Yep. And the other thing is the other thing I wanted to mention. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention was the fact that not only is the amount of named storms important for predicting where they're going to go, but also the return rates. And I know there are people out there that absolutely hate this method that I use with the return rates. There's one guy out there I read somewhere on one of the forums who goes, if I have to hear about that one more time, I'm going to punch my fist through the monitor. And it's like, all right, knock yourself out, dude. Cut your knuckles all up and get electrocuted while you're at it because you don't like the fact that I use return rates. But if you can come up with a better way to predict something 2 or 3 months from now as to where you think these storms are going to go, by all means have at it. But there is no way to scientifically or meteorologically figure out where a storm is going to go. We can't even figure out the timing of a trough 10 or 12 days out. So the only way you can figure out where these things are going to go. So I use return rates. That's my way of coming up with the cities, is based on there's ebbs and flows to the tropics. There are certain areas that get hit on an average of maybe every 2 to 3 years, and there's other areas that are every 5 or 6. And the proof in the pudding is that in the Hurricane City database, 152 locations, only in any given year, maybe 10% of those cities are overdue. And that shows you how accurate this method is, because if it wasn't accurate, there would be like half or 3/4 of the cities that were overdue, and the whole method would be stupid. But the fact that only 10% are overdue at any given time, and about probably 50% are due, and they usually get knocked out the year that they're due, tells you a lot about return rates, that there is something to that. And also there's the third predictive scenario I use, and that is the odds and ends scenario, such as patterns. Does this area get hit by 3 tropical storms followed by a hurricane? Does it get hit by 3 hurricanes followed by a tropical storm? Is there like 3-year gaps between hits, and then they go 7 years with nothing, and then there's another 3 years where they get hit in a row? There are patterns to certain areas getting hit, and I can't explain why this happens, but for whatever reason, it's accurate. And I know I hate to have to go through all this every year on the Hurricane Season Kickoff Show explaining the methodology of making these picks, but if I wasn't right, and I told Bill this when I started doing this back in 2003, if this doesn't work, in a few years I'll just drop the idea altogether. It's not worth continuing to do it if it's not good. But if you look at my track record on the predictions page, hurricanecity.com/predictions, you will see that there's a pretty good track record. Usually my top 5, 1 or 2 or 3 or more of my top 5 are affected just about every single hurricane season. And that just includes not just hurricanes, but tropical storms. So anyway, enough of the explaining about how I do it. Let's get right to the picks, because we got a lot of time to go here on trying to figure out. And again, we're going to take your phone calls and or emails at the end of the show. We're going to give away a couple tracking charts and some T-shirts, Hurricane City T-shirts, and
I'll give out the email after the majority of Jim's picks are complete.
Right. Yeah, because it's too hard to go through the city picks. I lose track where I'm at, and somebody will ask about something like the MJO or something, and it completely throws off the city picks. So we'll talk about all that stuff in the aftermath of the 20 cities and islands. So let's get right to it. Let's start with the number 20 pick in my top 20, and that is the Cayman Islands. And now, normally the Cayman Islands are usually in my top 5, because this is down here south of Cuba, and this is like one of my most affected areas in the Atlantic Basin. I think it's ranked number 4 or 5 in the total. It used to be number 1 for years and years.
Number 2 beyond Cape Hatteras, or did that change?
I think it's number 3 behind Grand Bahama Island, because what I did is recalculated the rankings based on extratropical systems and subtropical.
Oh, yeah, right.
And what that did was it added more cities further north into the top 50 that otherwise wouldn't be there if it was purely tropical storms. But since I added the extratropical systems, there's a whole bunch of them that have moved up the coast of the United States and affected areas like here in Norfolk. You got the northeastern United States. Not that any of them are, ranked in the top, but some of the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands got knocked down just a little bit because of that. Even though the Cayman Islands, if you want to really witness a true, probably significant hurricane, probably the best place in the Atlantic Basin, well, there's 2 places, in my opinion, if you ever wanted to witness a major hurricane, and that's the Cayman Islands and Grand Bahama Island, not Grand Bahama, Abaco Island, Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas. Those are 2 areas that just get pummeled time and time again by hurricanes. And so the Cayman Islands, though, are down this year. I'm not real high on this pick, but and I'll show you the reasons why at the end of my top 20. I'll show you a map of the tracks I expect this year and the color-coded map showing the areas that I think are more vulnerable compared to other areas. But the Cayman Islands, they're 1 year overdue for a named storm. Very rarely ever happens for the Cayman Islands when they're overdue. So, I mean, that's why they cracked the top 20. They get hit when there's an average of 11.77 named storms, so that fits right into my 12 named storm scenario. And they're not overdue for a hurricane or anything. They're right on schedule for a hurricane, so it probably will be a hurricane, but it could be a tropical storm. I'm not real confident of this pick. They very rarely, if ever, are overdue, sort of like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. If they ever crack the top 20, it's a pretty good chance they're going to get affected because they very rarely ever are overdue. So number 20, the Cayman Islands. All right, number 19 is Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Now remember this city in Hilton Head in South Carolina. And this will factor in and some of my other picks coming up here. But Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, they are 2 years overdue. Again, this is another area that very rarely ever gets overdue for a named storm. And we have an average of 9.09 named storms, so a little bit lower than what I'm thinking. They tend to get hit when there's a little bit slower hurricane seasons overall. But we could have an El Nino that's maybe a little stronger at the height of the hurricane season. Who knows? But here's the kicker. They are 16 years overdue for a hurricane, and that's really alarming. That would have been a ticking time bomb if it had not been for the 29 years overdue for the ABC Islands. There's a strong leaning for South Carolina this year, and that's one of the reasons it cracked the top 20, even though it's not one of the top cities. They're way overdue for a hurricane. Keep an eye on Hilton Head, South Carolina. All right, number 18 is Matagorda, Texas. Now, Matagorda, surprisingly, in slow hurricane seasons, usually Texas, at least South Texas, and Matagorda is kind of like in between, Port Arthur, Texas, and Brownsville. It's kind of halfway point between those 2 locations. Matagorda would be considered maybe the upper Texas coast. So this would get hit when there's right around an average hurricane season, maybe slightly above average, slightly below average, rather. Matagorda, Texas, they are 1 year overdue. They get hit when there's an average of 11 named storms. This is going all the way back to 1871 when I come up with these averages. They are 1 year overdue for a hurricane. I'm not keen on a Texas hit this year, but maybe a tropical storm. But the 11.00 average makes the cut. But I'm not real confident of this pick for Texas because Texas is not real high on my list this year to be affected. But that's one area that Central Texas coastline could be affected this year. All right, here we go. Number 17 on the list is Georgetown, South Carolina. Yet another South Carolina city cracks the top 20. Number 17, Georgetown, South Carolina. Again, 1 year overdue. They get hit when there's an average of 10.62 named storms. So, again, if it's a slower than normal hurricane season, even slower than the 12 named storms that I think we're going to get the remainder of the way, Georgetown would be affected, South Carolina. Now, the thing about Georgetown and Hilton Head that I just showed you in South Carolina If we have a more active hurricane season, say we end up with 14 or 15 more named storms the rest of the way, and we end up with a total of 17, then these areas might not be affected this year. But I think if we end up with 12 or 13 more named storms, I think these areas really need to watch out. Georgetown, South Carolina. I'm huge on the 10.62, close to Beaufort, South Carolina, in the top. Well, I'm not going to get to that yet, but it's again, the South Carolina leaning this year is rather huge, and so it's number 17 is Georgia. All right, number 16 on the list is Panacea, Florida, and that is in the Big Bend, Florida area, up just northeast of Apalachicola, Florida, in the Florida Panhandle area, the Big Bend, Florida area. And Panacea, Florida is 1 year overdue. They get hit when there's an average of 10.25 named storms. So, again, a little bit lower than what the average expectations are for this hurricane season. But, again, if it ends up being a slower season, look out for that area. In fact, the whole entire west coast of Florida really tends to get hit a lot when there's El Nino-type hurricane season. So we're going to watch for that. They're 2 years overdue for a hurricane. That concerns me. And if this area gets a hurricane up in there, that storm surge is going to be absolutely tremendous. Now, this is an area that if you drew a line straight north, you'd run into Tallahassee. So the emergency operations center up in North Florida could take a hit from a hurricane this year. I'm like 50-50 on this pick, maybe even 60% for a hurricane up that way. So I'm very concerned about Panacea, Florida. Okay, now we have next named storm on the... You know what? Wait a minute. I think I made a mistake in my opening comments here, now that I'm thinking about it. Let me see something. Okay, let me correct what my opening comments... My predictions are for 11.52 named storms this year. But I'm taking one or two off of that because of years past where we may have missed a couple of named storms. So really I'm expecting like 9 or 10 named storms the remainder of the way. I have to clear myself on that. I was reading my notes wrong at the beginning of the show. I'm expecting around 10. You give or take between 10 and 11 is about the amount of named storms I expect the remainder of the hurricane season. So let me clarify that. 10 or 11 named storms for the hurricane season, and that's where all these cities fall into that amount of named storms, which was Panacea I was just talking about. They're at 10.25 named storms, 2 years overdue for a hurricane, and that fits my criteria. My criteria is about 10.6 to be exact for the hurricane season. Number 15 on the list, and again, this goes towards the comments I had about the west coast of Florida, and here we go. This is my number 15, and this is Naples, and Naples, Florida is south of Fort Myers, almost directly west of Fort Lauderdale. If you went all the way over to the west coast from Fort Lauderdale, you'd run into Naples. And Naples is 1 year overdue for a named storm. They get hit when there's an average of 10.66 named storms. That's right where I'm thinking the amount of named storms are going to get the remainder of the hurricane season here, 10.66. And they are due for a hurricane this year. Leaning west coast Florida again. I'm thinking west coast of Florida is going to be one of the more vulnerable areas this hurricane season. So Naples is number 15. All right, number 14 on the list is Apalachicola, Florida. It makes sense. They're right next to Apalachicola. Panacea rather. Right down the road from Panacea, Florida, right near the Port St. Joe area and the whole just that southern portion of the Florida Panhandle up there. Apalachicola, Florida. They are due this year. And again, this is one of these areas that very rarely is ever overdue for a named storm, so they are due. So I expect them to get something up there this year. They get hit when there's an average of 10 named storms, so it's a little bit less than what I'm expecting the remainder of the way, but they are 6 years overdue for a hurricane. That's huge. That's why they cracked the top 20. 6 years overdue for a hurricane. And, again, that's near the Big Bend, Florida area, possibly a brush or a tropical storm, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a hurricane up that way either. So, again, that west coast of Florida up into that Big Bend area, I'm concerned about this hurricane season. Okay, number 13, Tampa, Florida, and that, again, fits right into that thinking of the west coast of Florida. Tampa, And again, I'll show you the maps of where I expect some tracks to happen this year, and I think we could see some development coming through the Caribbean, curving into the Gulf of Mexico, or something developing in the Western Caribbean Sea, either early or late. Watch your cord now. Here, let me get that out of your way so you can circle around here. Okay.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, Jim.
All right, Tampa, 2 years overdue for Tampa for a named storm. They get hit when there's an average of 8.83 named storms, so that's a little bit lower than what I'm expecting. So I think the west coast of Florida is going to get hit this year. If it doesn't reach my 11 named storms that I'm expecting the rest of the way, 10 to 11 named storms, if we end up with only 9 or 10 named storms, maybe 8 named storms the rest of the way, the remainder of the hurricane season, I think the west coast of Florida is going to get wailed on this year. So now here's the kicker with Tampa. 36 years overdue for a direct hit from a hurricane. That's ticking time bomb, even more so than the ABC Islands. But they don't get hit by that many hurricanes, so it's not surprising. But Tampa, 36 years overdue. Again, way overdue for a hurricane. Big leaning towards the Big Bend, Florida area. Now, they're lower than my next pick, which is Andros Island, Bahamas, only because I think this would be a brush or a tropical storm. I'm not real high on the hurricane scenario, but again, if it ends up being a slower than normal hurricane season the rest of the way, like 9 or 10 named storms as opposed to 11 or 12 named storms, I really think the west coast of Florida is in some serious trouble this year. Okay, number 12, Andros Island, Bahamas. That's the island. It's just east-southeast of Miami in the western Bahama Islands. And Andros Island is 2 years overdue for a named storm. Now, this is one of those areas. The Bahamas overall are never overdue for a named storm. So this is really alarming. Andros Island, Bahamas, 2 years overdue. They get hit when there's an average of 8.50 named storms. And the reason is, you would think that this area in the Bahamas get hit when there's generally really active hurricane seasons. But Andros Island is like the exception in the Bahamas. They get hit when there's generally slow hurricane seasons because what happens is they develop close to home. They travel over Andros. They might go through the Florida Straits or hit the Florida Keys because the Florida Keys also get hit during slower hurricane season. And then they travel up the west coast of Florida. So I'm really thinking Andros Island's going to get affected this year. They get hit when there's an average of 8.50 named storms. So again, if it's a slower than normal hurricane season the rest of the way, if there's like less than 10 named storms, then this is an area we got to watch for. They are 5 years overdue for a hurricane. Extremely unlikely that any Bahama Island chain would be this much overdue for a hurricane, so I'm really concerned with Andros Island. The only reason Andros Island is not in the top 5 this year is because of the 8.50 named storm average, because I'm expecting more than that going out the remainder of the hurricane season. So, but if it's slow, like I said, watch out west coast of Florida, southwest Bahamas, Florida Keys, all these type of areas. This would be on the way to the southern tip of Florida if a hurricane was to come that way. Plus, they're 5 years overdue for a hurricane. Very unusual. 8.50 named storms. Too low, but it can't be ignored. Andros Island really concerns me going into this hurricane season. All right, number 11 on the list, and that is Hollywood, Florida. And Hollywood, Florida is south of my location in Delray Beach, Florida. It's just north of Miami. And that's where actually Derek Sibley, storm chaser, hurricane tracker, is from down there. And he's really into the hurricane season. I don't know if any of you may have caught. He did a show the other night. I think it was last night on the hurricane season. I didn't get a chance to watch it because we were busy setting the network up here. But Hollywood, Florida. By the way, speaking of Derek, he's going to have his cam streaming. So if I'm out in the storm, now we talked about this scenario about South Florida getting hit, because if it's South Florida, I might just set up the IP cam on the beach and get back to Hurricane City and continue to conduct the broadcast. However, if it's further south, like if it's down in Miami or
North
especially
Miami and south.
Yeah, South Miami and areas like that, I might get down there and stay down there to not only retrieve the IP cam, but also to give kind of live update reports on what's happening down in Miami on HurricaneCity.tv. But Derek will have his cam streaming from not only his house, but he'll have his cam. He's going to be out in the storm apparently as well, driving around. So there's going to be like 4 cams for for us to dip in and out of.
Cam overload. This is going to be a challenge.
Yeah,
and
South Florida's going to be just a huge smorgasbord of cameras and live sources when a hurricane hits down here. So it's really going to be interesting to see. But anyway, Hollywood, they are due this year. This is an area. This is one of the cities out of all the 152 cities in the database that is, never overdue. Hollywood just gets. They get them from south of them, north of them, east of them, west of them. So Hollywood always gets affected in some way, just about once every 2 or 3 years. Without doubt, this area gets affected. And we're in a long drought right now in Florida. Since 2006, this area has not been affected. Arguably, you could say Bonnie affected Hollywood as a brush, Tropical Storm Bonnie in 2010. But, this area is really overdue, in my opinion, for a hurricane. And we're 11. They get hit when there's an average of 11.33 named storms. So if we continue to be on schedule, I'm thinking 10 to 11 more named storms the rest of the way. If we have maybe even one more named storm, like say we have 12 more named storms the rest of the way, I think Hollywood's really in trouble. I could see Hollywood getting hit. They are 1 year overdue for a hurricane in Hollywood. That also hardly ever happens where they're overdue for a hurricane. And there's a strong leaning for the southeastern United States, the same as, not only for the strong leaning in the southeast, Florida coastline, and the west coast of Florida, and the Big Bend up in there, but also the fact that amount of named storms could go either way. It could be slower than normal the rest of the way. We could end up with 8 more named storms, or we could end up with 11 or 12 more named storms, which would put southeastern Florida a little more of a risk. Again, if it's less named storms the rest of the way, I'm thinking Florida Keys, west coast of Florida, that type of a scenario. So Hollywood, Florida is number 11 on the list.
Number 10, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, number 10 is Delray Beach, the home of HurricaneCity.com. Now, people probably watch this and go, oh, you always have Delray in there because you live there. No, it's all mathematical, I'm telling you. Now, there's one thing I want to mention while I have this graphic up. Not only is it the home base of HurricaneCity.com, but next year, the predictions are going to be done a little differently. And I talked to Bill about this, and we were talking about how we have a bunch of cities crunched together in South Florida, and it kind of skews the numbers a little bit. So what I'm going to do is eliminate some of the cities, and I might even eliminate Delray. Now, it'll be available in the database. We'll still calculate it. It'll be available as a featured city when there's a hurricane hitting there. But what I will not do is calculate it in the top 50, because it's kind of skewing the numbers, and it tends to put more cities in the Florida Peninsula in the top 50. So we're going to space them apart. Once every 20 to 30 miles, there's going to be a city. And we're not going to use cities that are only 10 miles apart from each other. It's going to be like a 30-mile gap.
In other words, more geographical.
Yeah, more of a geographical alignment.
Regional.
That's more calculable. Somebody like Phil Klotzbach, and him and I go back and forth about this all the time, but he really doesn't seem to I don't know if he just doesn't understand it, or he just doesn't believe in the method of calculating what areas are affected more than others. But if it's evenly spaced apart, just about anybody with a calculator and a brain and some kind of interest in this kind of thing could probably calculate it themselves and know that the numbers are accurate based on the fact that they're all going to be evenly spaced cities. Now, you're not going to get it perfectly accurate. We're not going to exactly get 30 miles apart all the way up and down the coast. Some might be 23 miles apart. Some might be 40 miles apart. But I want to keep it more uniform so that the top 50 most affected areas are more accurate. All right, Delray, the home of Hurricane City. 2 years overdue. Again, Delray, another one of these cities. Now, Delray Beach is up near that West Palm, which sticks out the furthest east in Florida. And that area tends to get hit a lot by these systems that are recurving and heading north towards areas like Virginia Beach here, where they're starting to make that turn and they brush. So areas like Delray and West Palm get a lot of brushes from hurricanes and tropical storms as they're making that turn. Now, there's also a rich hurricane history of them blasting right through southern Florida and getting affected that way, too. So there's like 50-50 brushes and hits. And this year, Delray Beach, I have 11.84 named storms for Delray Beach. So, again, if it's a little bit busier than what I'm expecting the rest of the way, if we have 11 or 12 more named storms, Delray Beach, Hollywood, Miami, all these areas are going to be a much higher risk. But they're not in the top 5 because I'm still not thinking we're going to be that busy the rest of the way, but it wouldn't surprise me. They're 1 year overdue for a hurricane here in Delray. and that's also very unusual. All right.
You're fine.
Yeah, and another thing about Delray Beach, I think that if we have a slower season the rest of the way, something's going to come in south of there, and I think this would be a brush scenario for Delray this year. I'm not expecting a direct hit. I think this is going to be a brush scenario, so Delray, number 10. All right, number 9. Number 9 is, you know what, Bill, let's drop your email to people right now. If they have any questions about this or comments, we can read them when I'm done with the predictions.
Please email bill@hurricanecity.com. Again, that's bill@hurricanecity.com with your questions for Jim or myself. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Number 9 is Marathon, Florida, and this ties into the Andros Island scenario of a system developing in the Bahamas, heading west, kind of like Hurricane Rita did in 2005. I could see a scenario like that where you have a hurricane developing in the Bahamas, and this area is 1 year overdue. Very unusual for anywhere in the state of Florida, southern Florida, to be overdue for a named storm. They get hit when there's an average of 10.08 named storms. So notice the further south you go in the peninsula, the more they tend to get hit when there's slower hurricane seasons. Again, we're expecting a little bit slower, at least I am anyway. Probably 10, 11 more named storms the rest of the way. If we end up with 12 or 13, shift it north a little bit. I'm expecting, areas like in the West Palm area, Hollywood North to be affected. If it's like 10 or 9 named storms the rest of the way or less, then I would lower it down to Miami, the Florida Keys. Those are going to be areas that are going to be more concerning to me. They are 5 years overdue for a hurricane, which is astounding for the Florida Keys. They usually don't go that long without a hurricane hit, or at least a brush. There's strong leaning for the Florida Keys again this year if we have a little bit slower than what I'm expecting the rest of the way. So Marathon, number 9 on the list this year. And again, those Florida Keys, while we have the Keys up, let's talk about that scenario. Would I be down there chasing it? Probably not. I have a friend down in the Marathon area that's allowing me to set that IP cam up in the Florida Keys so we can watch it all go underwater together on HurricaneCity.tv. I won't be there because I'm not going to. I know how to swim and everything, but I don't want to lose my vehicle.
This is not a kamikaze mission, folks.
Yeah, it's just stupid. Derek and I have talked about this, and Jim Leonard and everybody, about going down to the Florida Keys when there's a major hurricane hitting. And I'm sorry. I mean, if you remember Wilma from a few years ago, that thing was like 90 miles north of the Keys, and it dragged like 5 or 6 feet of water all over most of the Florida Keys. So good luck with that. If you want to go down to the Florida Keys and swim for your life, I mean, that's fine. But I won't be down in the Florida Keys for a major hurricane. There might be a high point of the island of Key West that you could maybe get up to. Everybody will be. You ever seen a puddle of water and like there's a stick or a twig in there and all the ants are calling on it? That's going to be like Key West. There's going to be a bunch of people trying to get into one space on that island while the water's like rising and everybody's running for their lives. Tall building, you want to vertically evacuate up in a tall building, you get away from the rising water, but the Florida Keys just scares the crap out of me, and I won't be caught down there.
People are going to be banging down the doors to the National Weather Service office in Key West trying to get in there, because it's really one of the only safe areas in the Key West areas is that, and the government has it. Yeah,
but I even wonder if that's going to go underwater. I mean, seriously, it's a strong, solid building down there, but it's a beautiful building. If you ever get the chance to go down to Key West and look at the National Weather Service, it's really an outstanding building, but I wouldn't be caught there. It'd still go underwater. The Keys just... No,
it's a death trap. I'm sorry.
It's a no-no. I'm just hoping I can get the camera set up and get out of Dodge and then be able to get back in there and get the camera, because here's the problem. The place could be underwater for a long period of time. Now, storm surge recedes and everything gets back to normal, but the police will probably completely block off the Florida Keys unless you live there. You're not going to be able to get in there. I'll have to get some kind of special permission to go in there and get that camera back, but we're going to have it on HurricaneCity.tv, and it'll be recorded in the box, so even if it's not live, it's going to be recorded. We'll be able to show it to you, but I'll tell you, Marathon and the Florida Keys scares the crap out of me, and let's just hope that I hope everybody that's listening from the Florida Keys tonight, if you're in the danger zone, I know you might think that it's 20 years, we've never gone underwater, blah, blah, blah. You haven't had a big one there in a long time, in the Florida Keys. So it's going to go under, especially if it's a big, powerful Katrina-type system.
And by the time you realize that you're in trouble, it's too late. It's too late. by the time you realize you're in trouble, it's too late.
Yeah, I got you. So, yeah, they need to get out of there in advance of the hurricane, and hopefully we're not going to have a high death toll down there. But, William Wagner at Early Alert. By the way, thanks to Early Alert this year, attended the hurricane conference. Forgot to mention at the beginning of the show. Early Alert's another supporter of Hurricane City, the emergency management specialists, and they help support Hurricane City. And we'll have some of their guys on the air if it happens where South Florida's threatened, and they're the experts on the Florida Keys. So we'll definitely have them on if the Florida Keys scenario pans out this year.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that email is bill@hurricanecity.com, bill@hurricanecity.com. Go ahead, Jim, with your questions and concerns.
Yep, go ahead and drop the emails now, and we'll respond to them after the top 20 cities and islands. All right, here's my number 8 pick, and, of course, that's Miami. That's Boca Raton, Florida. Boca Raton, Florida, north of Miami. That's in southern Palm Beach County and south of Delray. They are 3 years overdue. And again, this is very rare for this area to be this much overdue. It really concerns me that so many South Florida cities are way overdue like this. It just very rarely ever happens. The most you'll ever see these cities is maybe a year overdue, if that. So Boca Raton, 3 years overdue. Now, here's the problem with this area, in my opinion, the reason it did crack the top 5. They get hit when there's an average of 12.20 named storms, 12.20. So it would have to be a pretty active remainder of the hurricane season for the area to be affected up in that direction in Palm Beach County. If we end up having a more active remainder of the hurricane season, may have 11 or 12 or 13 more named storms, then I could see Palm Beach County getting affected this year. So Boca Raton, not real high on it. 1 year overdue for a hurricane. Very rarely ever happens. Again, that a bit high on the average for what I expect, but this city is rarely overdue, so be careful in Boca Raton. Just have your eyes out to the east and the south if you live in Boca Raton. Okay, number 7. Again, that heavy-leaning west coast of Florida. Homosassa, Florida, number 7. This is the Big Bend, Florida area. What really concerns me about this area is the fact that they have a nuclear power plant up in here. And Bill and I have talked about this scenario because of the Fukushima power plant in Japan, the meltdown they had after that tsunami. And this area really concerns me because this Big Bend, Florida is very vulnerable to storm surge. I have been there before just fishing in regular high tide scenario, and some of the coastal roads flood when it's an abnormal high tide. I can only imagine what's going to happen if you get a major hurricane in there. That water's just going to go way inland, and that nuclear power plant is sitting right there with those generators. I've been told by people in the emergency management business, yeah, we're ready to go. There's nothing to worry about at the power plant. I think it's the Turkey Key power plant or something like Turkey, I don't know, something like that, up in Homosassa. But I'm really worried about that nuclear power plant up there. And Homosassa really, that's another area kind of like the Florida Keys. It's going to go completely underwater. So if you live in the Big Bend, Florida area, have your life preserver ready if you don't know how to swim, because you're going to need it when a hurricane hits up there. 1 year overdue for a named storm. 10.20 named storms the rest of the way. That's about what I'm expecting, so it's right in that criteria between 10 and 11 named storms. Here's the kicker. 32 years overdue for a hurricane. Very, very rare that a city goes this long without a hurricane hit, and this matches kind of the Tampa, Florida area. They're also 36 years overdue for a hurricane hit, direct impacts from a hurricane. So two areas on the west coast of Florida over 30 years overdue for any hurricane, not to mention major. Now, I'm not talking brushes and glancing blows and all that. I'm talking about direct impacts of the core of a hurricane coming over this area over 30 years. And they are 1 year overdue for a named storm. So big leaning towards the Big Bend, Florida area this year, especially if it's a little bit slower the rest of the way. So look out in Homosassa, Florida. Good. All right, number 6, Miami. Now, Miami, the Miami Heat. I'm not going to razz you about that anymore. Now everybody's going to be wanting the Heat to lose the rest of the way because they see the beating I'm putting on you.
No, it's all good. I talked a lot of trash, and I deserve all the grief that Mr. Williams is giving me is well deserved. Number 6, Miami. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, number 6, Miami. And they are due. And the reason this is important, because Miami is never overdue. I mean, I can't remember the last time Miami was ever overdue. They're due this year. So the chances are pretty good a named storm is going to come within 60 miles of the city of Miami. 10.60 named storms when they get hit on average. That's right exactly what I'm expecting the rest of the way. That's going to be dead on. If we have 11 named storms the rest of the way, look out Miami. And they are 1 year overdue for a hurricane, which is also very rarely.
Jim,
rare.
can I stop you there?
Yeah.
If you look at the picks so far, you have Miami, Hollywood, and Delray, all in your picks to this point. That is about a 55 to 60 mile radius.
Yes.
I mean, that's almost that's all. And we were talking about the geographical, going to the geographical region next year. I mean, look at that again. It points to one geographic area. Look at these picks, geographic regions.
Well, here's
focusing on geographic regions.
Right, but here's the scenario for South Florida, and this is why I've emphasized this on these individual picks. It depends. Like the rest of the way, if it's more active than what I'm expecting, you're going to shift it north. It's going to be like Broward County north.
Yeah.
If it's slower than what I'm expecting the rest of the way, then it's going to be like Miami south. So even though they're all geographically close, it's going to depend on the way things pan out the rest of the hurricane season. So don't let that fool you, because it's going to be one or the other. I don't think it's going to be both, although it could be both geographic areas. But it's going to depend on the way the remainder of the season pans out. So Miami, not a real high storm surge threat for the city of Miami, but just the inexperience of any significant major hurricanes. It's been a 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Andrew, even though the city was not slammed by Andrew. It was on the northern skirts of the CDO of Andrew, but the main areas from Kendall south were the ones that were devastated by Hurricane Andrew. Miami just had the typical windows broken, trees down, that sort of power lines down, but the city of Miami didn't get the hammering that South Miami got.
10 miles south of the downtown area, and in a storm like that, with it being so small,
yeah,
that made all the difference.
Yeah, and so that you can understand where the complacency sets in. I mean, you have these tropical storms, these little, Hurricane Katrina, Cat 1 coming through there. There's a lot of complacency going, Irene back in 89. You've got Tropical Storm Bonnie. You got, it's just been a bunch of, like Wilma was a Cat 1, Cat 2 in South Florida, north going into Palm Beach County from the west. I mean, they just haven't been really tested in Miami since Andrew, so there might be some complacency setting in, and it could be a problem for Miami. I just hope everybody in Miami is ready this year. All right. Can we give a drum roll or something? We don't have any sound effects here. The sound effects maker is back up at Delray. All right. The top 5, these are the ones you got to pay attention to. If you're in the top 5,
batten down the hatches.
Usually it's like the number 3 and 4 that seems to get hit every year. Occasionally the number 1 pick gets hit, but if you're 3 or 4, like those are the ones that, for whatever reason,
Wasn't Elizabeth City in 03 number 1? And I think you nailed it.
Yeah, Elizabeth City was the number 1 pick, I think, in 03.
First year you did it, you nailed it, number 1.
Yeah.
Wow.
While I'm rambling here, if you want to take a look at the predictions from my past years, it's hurricanecity.com/predictions. And scroll down to the yellow highlighted areas. Those were last year's picks, and then you'll see a list of since 2003, the way I picked what areas were affected. So without further ado, yeah.
Can I give the email one more time?
Yes, please.
It is. We only have one email right now. We invite your questions about the top 5, about the picks, and any questions or concerns you have. Please email Bill at hurricanecity.com. That's Bill at hurricanecity.com. with your questions for either Jim or myself. Thank you. And now on to the top 5. Here is Jim again. Good.
Okay, let's get to the top 5. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time for those of you just tuning in. Sometimes you just want to tune in and hear the top 5. Here it is. And by the way, these will all be listed on the website. Probably tomorrow I'll go ahead and slap them up on the predictions page so you know what the cities and islands were picked. And then on the 5th, this entire show will be archived. For the archive subscribers, it won't be up until the 5th of June. So if you want to watch the show, you can see it then in its entirety. So here we go. Let's get to the top 5. These are the most important ones. And let's start with number 5. on the list, and that is Mérida, Mexico in the Yucatan Peninsula. This is an area that is in the northwest Yucatan Peninsula, and Mérida, Mexico is 2 years overdue. Not completely surprising when they're overdue, because this is not one of the more well-hit areas in the Atlantic Bay. They get a lot of these systems that come in from the east-southeast. Hurricane Allen and Gilbert come to mind. These systems that come up through there. Of course, you had Isidore back in 2002. That's coming down there as a Cat 4 for crying out loud. But then it weakened right as it approached the coast there in the Yucatan and hit Mérida, Mexico. Still did quite a bit of damage down there. But they don't get generally hit by too many significant direct impact hits. But they are 2 years overdue. So 10.46 named storms. That's the key for this city. And this is why I cracked the top 5. They're 2 years overdue, and they're due for a hurricane. Plus, it's the 2.46 named storms the rest of the way, which is right where my thinking is. Like 11 named storms are going to have the rest of the way. If that happens, Mérida, Mexico should be affected by a named storm. This is the number 5 area, Mérida, Mexico. Let's go to number 4. Number 4 is Spring Hill, Florida. There we go again, west coast of Florida. West coast of Florida, Spring Hill. Now, this is just north of Tampa. This area is 5 years overdue. Now, this area is not as vulnerable to storm surge because they kind of, like Tampa area, kind of takes the brunt of the surge and Pinellas County. And then when you get a little bit further north, the water is kind of paralleling the coast and heading towards Homosassa and Cedar Key. So this area is not as vulnerable to storm surge as the areas further north and south. But nevertheless, Spring Hill, Florida, be careful up there. You're 5 years overdue for a named storm. That's very unusual for any city in the state of Florida, or anywhere for that matter, to be 5 years overdue for a named storm.
Jim, may I stop you for an email? Brian asked from Columbus, Ohio, why there, and I think we've addressed this, but I'll address it since I've seen it. Why do there seem to be so many cities year after year in your top 20 from South Florida?
Well, we went over that earlier, and the reason is because of the amount of cities that are in the database that are in South Florida. The cities are only based, let's see, you have, just in Dade County, we have 2 cities. Broward County, 3. Palm Beach County, there's about 5. So that's a lot of cities crunched together in about a 100-mile stretch of coastline.
And the geographic redesign for next year should eliminate a lot of that.
Yeah, we're gonna do a little bit of difference in the calculations next year. We're gonna exclude some of these cities. We're gonna focus on like South Florida. Instead of there being, say, 12 or 15 cities, there's going to probably be 7 next year that are going to be calculated. So you're going to see less emphasis on South Florida. But even with that said, like South Florida is still in any given year. And this goes back to the point of the vulnerability of South Florida. I mean, no matter how you calculate it, the area is very rarely ever overdue. So they're always going to be in the top 20. I mean, these cities in South Florida, the same with the North Carolina cities as well, and the Bahamas, are usually in the top 5 because they get hit so frequently. It's almost a dead given that those areas in any given hurricane season are going to be affected by a named storm. It's just the way it is. That I will not be able to do anything about, but what I will do for South Florida is try to trim some of the fat of South Florida cities down there. There's maybe a little bit too many of them, and I could trim it in half and create a significant distance between the cities. The one that I struggle with the most is the Broward County, South Florida area, because you have Hollywood in the south, we have Fort Lauderdale in the middle part of the county, and then we have Deerfield Beach in the northern part of the county. So I'm thinking of maybe eliminating Hollywood and Deerfield and then just leaving it as Fort Lauderdale. So we'd go like South Miami, Fort Lauderdale, maybe Boca Raton, and then go right up to West Palm Beach. That's the way it would be spaced out in South Florida instead of all the smaller cities in between. So that's the way. I have a lot of calculating to do on that, but that's probably the way it'll be for next year. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, go ahead.
Spring Hill, 9.37 named storms when they get hit, going back over 100 years of data. So 9.36 would be kind of slow the rest of the hurricane season. To expect us to only have 9 or 10 named storms the rest of the way. But if it's a slower than normal remainder of the hurricane season, I say remainder because we've already had 2 named storms, But if we have 9.3 or 9 or 10 named storms the rest of the way, I would expect the west coast of Florida is going to get hammered. And, well, not necessarily hammered. It could be a tropical storm, but they're going to get a storm up in there on that west coast if it's slower than normal season the rest of the way. And they're 32 years overdue. So, again, there's 3 cities on the west coast of Florida, Spring Hill, Homosassa, and Tampa, Florida, that are well over 30 years overdue for a hurricane. And that just really scares me. When it's, the longer you go, the higher your chances are of getting hit by a hurricane. That's just the fact of nature. They get hit by a hurricane when there's an average of 10.77 named storms in a year. So they go up a little bit when there's a hurricane hit. There tends to be a little bit more of a busy season. So Spring Hill. What I could also see, say we have a busier season the rest of the way. Say we have 11 or 12 named storms, maybe a little more than what I'm expecting. I could see a hurricane coming into South Lake, Palm Beach County, crossing over Lake Okeechobee, and then cutting through Tampa, Spring Hill, Homosassa, those areas in the Big Bend, and going into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a little bit more of a busy season. So that's just another scenario for Spring Hill, Florida. So Spring Hill, number 4. Remember what I mentioned a little while ago, the number 3 and the number 4, top 5, always seem to have this knack of getting hit. So Spring Hill, Florida, watch out this year.
Number 3.
Number 3, Key Largo. And there they are in the northern Florida Keys. That is an area that really concerns me. And again, that same scenario of, what was it, Steve, that was mentioned, too many cities in South Florida?
He didn't give a name. I don't think he gave a name.
Okay, well, here we go. Yeah, another South Florida city. Hey, don't get up out of your chairs yet. Don't leave. There's still a couple more picks here. They don't always have to be South Florida. Key Largo, number 3. And this is that scenario again, the system developing in the West Bahamas, cutting through the Florida Straits and or the Florida Keys, and going up the west coast of Florida. That's like a huge track this year. Northern Keys, less vulnerable to storm surge than the lower Keys. If it's Key Largo, I might think about it because there's an escape route. You get down in a Marathon, there's no escape route. So Key Largo, I might try to wing it with the IP cam and the dash cam and all that. That would be a scenario, maybe the southern tip of the peninsula, where you can base yourself there, and then if the storm surge comes in, you can bail, you can get out of Dodge, as long as they don't have the roads blocked or something ridiculous. Imagine the police blocking the road and letting you drown in there. I don't think that. I don't think.
They'd let you out.
Yeah, they'd let you out, but they just wouldn't let you back in.
They'd let you out or arrest you, one of the two.
All right, Key Largo, 9.86 named storms for the season if they're going to get hit this year. Again, that would be right in line with what I'm thinking. Again, I'm thinking 10, 11 named storms the rest of the way. If it's a little slower than that, Key Largo, they are 6 years overdue for a hurricane. Absolutely unheard of for this area to be that much overdue for a hurricane. So the Florida Keys really concerns me this year. And they are number 3. Again, the number 3 and 4 cities, usually get hit a lot in the top 5. So be careful in the Florida Keys this year is all I have to say. The number 2 area, Beaufort, South Carolina. Number 2. Now, this is 3 cities in the top 20 in South Carolina. That has never happened ever since I've been doing this. And that really sends a lot. The last time I picked a bunch of cities in one state was in Mississippi, and they got hit by Hurricane Katrina. So I'm really concerned for South Carolina. Basically, in a nutshell, South Carolina, South Florida, west coast of Florida, Big Bend, really sending alarms this year for me. But
so that's Beaufort, what was it? Hilton Head Island, and Jamestown. What?
Yeah,
what was the last one?
Beaufort, South Carolina. We have Georgetown, South Carolina, and Hilton Head Island,
Hilton
South
Head
Carolina.
Island.
So
3 of them.
basically, spread out in South Carolina. Basically, from like just south of Charleston down is really a concern for me this year, but city of Charleston, not necessarily. It's going to be either just south or just north or somewhere in there, but that's my thinking. Beaufort, South Carolina, that area is really want to watch out this year. And this is another vulnerable area to storm surge, a lot of inlet waterways for the water to pile up, and it really concerns me, Beaufort, South Carolina this year. Now, they get hit. They're 2 years overdue, And they get hit when there's an average of 10.20 named storms. That's right in line with what I'm thinking the rest of the way. 10.2. They're 4 years overdue for a hurricane. Very unusual to be 4 years overdue for a hurricane. Now, named storms, they could be overdue, but hurricanes, they usually get hit right on schedule. But they're 4 years overdue in South Carolina for a hurricane in Beaufort, South Carolina. So Beaufort cracks the number 2 position. The entire state of South Carolina really concerns me this year. This is the area I was talking about that you might be surprised based on the numbers that this would be the area that would be vulnerable, because I don't think I've ever had South Carolina in my top emphasis in any year of predictions.
South Carolina is very difficult because a lot of storms are recurving or already making that turn. I mean, you got to have a real strong high pressure to really force them in there.
Yeah, you're right. You know, it is a tough one because you had Hugo in 1989 come plowing right in there from the southeast, and then you had a lot of brushes to the south. You've had brushes to the north, but also look at what's happened so far. This, early before the season even started, we've had 2 systems up that way. We had Alberto, right, 90, 100 miles right just east of there, and moving off to the south, and then we had Burl that was developing up and
kind of buzzing the southern route again.
Yeah, so. If maybe that's a little bit of writing on the wall there.
Yep.
Those 2 systems up there and that little elbow up in there where the Georgia, you're not too far from there either. Georgia is another area that really scares me for storm surge. Oh, my God. You get a hurricane coming into that southeast region there and all that water piling up in Georgia. Georgia's just going to go completely underwater. That's another area. If a hurricane's hitting Georgia, I might slap an IP cam on one of those little, like, St. Simon's Island or something and just get out of Dodge because that's all going underwater. And I don't want to, I won't drown. I know how to swim. But, I don't want to lose my vehicle. I don't want to get clobbered and the whole 9 yards. So I would not want to stick around in Georgia or South Carolina coastal waters with major hurricanes coming in there. It's just going to be a very bad situation. All right, number 1, Cabo Corrientes, Cuba. I love to bring this up to Lixie and Avilan down at the Hurricane Center about Cabo Corrientes because I've met him a couple of times. I'm like, so can you tell me about Cabo Corrientes? And he's like, what? I go, yeah, that little finger that sticks out there on the west coast of Cuba. It just sticks out there like, hit me. It's got the hit me sign on it. Because it's right there in the Yucatan Channel, and everything that's recurving and going into the Gulf of Mexico is just sitting there like that would be like one of those places if you want to see a major just sit there and camp out on Cabo Corrientes right on the west coast of Cuba. So I asked him, I go, have you ever been there before? And he goes, no. Like he was pissed off about it. No, I've never been there. I'm like, oh, do you know anything about Cabo Corrientes?
No.
I go, can we move on to the next subject, please? I don't want to answer about Cabo Corrientes anymore. Oh, it's funny. What about the Isle of Youth? You know anything about that? I don't know if he's ever even been down there. But Cabo Corrientes. All right, Cabo Corrientes. 3 years overdue. Derek, if you're listening and you're down there interning and you see, go up to Lixie and Avila and ask him about Cabo Corrientes and then run real fast.
He'll throw you out.
Yeah,
No.
he'll throw you out along with the cats and all the other crap that goes on there. 3 years overdue. Cabo Corrientes, Cuba. Very, very unusual. This area never is overdue. They get hit when there's an average of 10.36 named storms. That's right in line with what I'm thinking the rest of the way. Now, we could be a lot busier than this the rest of the way, and I'm going to eat crow on all this stuff. Although, I still say Palm Beach County and areas like that will get hit if it's a busier than, season. I think those areas are going to get hit. Slower, Florida Keys, west coast of Florida, South Carolina. But Cabo Corrientes there could be a system developing in the Caribbean, heading north, into the Gulf of Mexico, maybe heading for that west coast of Florida, or maybe heading towards my number 18 pick, Matagorda, Texas.
Yep.
That's the one that's outside of the high-risk areas. The only area outside of the high-risk areas this year is Matagorda, Texas, and the Cayman Islands. And the ABC Islands down in the Caribbean that hardly ever get hit. And
Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, if you don't know what the ABC Islands are.
That's right. And they're 1 year overdue for a hurricane in Cabo Corrientes. 1 year overdue for a hurricane. That hardly ever happens. So that's my number 1, Cabo Corrientes, Cuba. Number 2, Beaufort, South Carolina. Big leaning on South Carolina this year. Number 3, Key Largo. Number 4, Spring Hill, Florida. Number 5, Merida, Mexico. Number 6, Miami. Number 7, Homosassa, Florida. Number 8, Boca Raton, Florida. Number 9, Marathon, Florida. Number 10, Delray Beach, Florida. Number 11, Hollywood, Florida. Number 12, Andros Island, Bahamas. Number 13, Tampa. Number 14, Apalachicola. Number 15, Naples. 16, Panacea. 17, Georgetown, South Carolina. 18, Matagorda, Texas. 19, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Number 20, Cayman Islands. So basically, 1, 2,
Your
3,
ticking
4,
time bombs?
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of my top 20 are in the state of Florida. And 3 of my top 20 are in South Carolina. So that tells you the 2 areas that are vulnerable this year. Ticking time bomb, I already mentioned, that's the ABC Islands.
Oh, that's dumb. My fault.
And I have my honorable mentions again, which are Kingston, Jamaica. And that would fall right into the development down in the Caribbean and heading in the general southeastern United States.
Yep.
Cocoa Beach, Florida, that would be if we have a little bit more of a busier season. We have the system starting to turn more northwest, heading towards central Florida maybe. Daytona Beach, same thing. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that falls into the whole South Carolina landfall scenario. That's northern South Carolina. Ponce, Puerto Rico, that's kind of the odd one out there. The eastern Caribbean, I'm not real high on this year, but Ponce, numbers are lining up. Chokoloskee, Florida, which is the very southern tip of Florida, north of the Florida Keys, that would make sense because I'm expecting the Florida Keys to get hit if it's a little slower. Jacksonville was honorable mention. That was before Burl hit them, so I can already check that off the list. And Long Island, New York. Fred, you're listening? Long Island was an honorable mention, meaning it would have cracked the top 20 had, some other things been lined up, but they were affected last year by Hurricane Irene, so that's probably the only reason they didn't crack the top 20. There's not a rich history of Long Island being hit 2 years in a row. It really doesn't happen that often, so that's the only reason they didn't crack the top 20. But other than that, the numbers line up for Long Island, so be careful up in Long Island. So anyway, let me show you my maps for what I expect this year. And these are all my picks for this hurricane season. Ticking time bomb, again, ABC Islands down here. The areas to watch: Puerto Rico, Jamaica, southwest tip of Florida, central Florida, North Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina border, and Long Island. The areas that I'm really concerned about this year are the Cayman Islands, Merida, Mexico, Cabo Corrientes, Cuba, the western Bahamas, southeastern Florida coastline, the west coast of Florida, the Florida Panhandle, east of Apalachicola, Texas, and South Carolina, especially South Carolina. That really freaks me out because they've never really been lined up to be in my top 5, and I'm really concerned about South Carolina. I've already had 2 near misses already before the season even started. And now, let me address you people that are in the, let me get my tracks up there before I do that. Okay, here's my tracking thinking this year. First of all, I'm thinking maybe something coming up through the Eastern Caribbean. Even though I didn't really have anything for the Eastern Caribbean other than Ponce, Puerto Rico, something skimming the Bahamas, heading up into the Georgia-South Carolina border. The track I'm really thinking is going to happen this year is something through the Bahamas, central Bahamas, maybe southwestern Bahamas, going through the southern tip of Florida or the Florida Keys, and going up the west coast of Florida, maybe heading up into Apalachicola. The third scenario is something developing down near the Cayman Islands, heading up through Cabo Corrientes, Cuba, and having Lixie and Avila head down there, and then going up just north of Tampa, maybe into the Homosassa area up in there, and cutting across the state and affecting South Carolina as a backdoor system. That's possible. Then we have another scenario of maybe something developing down near the Cayman Islands, cutting through central Cuba, right up the Florida Keys, southeastern Florida, and out to sea. And then we have an area where maybe Jamaica gets affected, the Cayman Islands, the Yucatan Peninsula, and then heads into central Texas. So those are my tracks that I'm the most concerned about this year. Now, with that track map up there on the screen, that does not mean that if you live in the Florida Panhandle towards Pensacola, If you live in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, North coast of Texas, does not mean that you're not going to get affected this year. These are just my opinions. In fact, every year, Bill will tell you this, every year there is an area or two or even three that gets affected that I never even called for to get hit. So anybody listening in any of these areas, North Carolina, you guys get hit almost every single year. The only reason you're not in the top 5 this year is because you were affected last year by Irene. That's it. It's as simple as that. And they get hit a lot 2 years in a row. So the Outer Banks, Wilmington, areas like that, you could get affected this year. Norfolk, up in this area, Virginia Beach, New Jersey. You were affected by Irene last year. Highly unlikely you're going to get another Irene track. It's possible. I'm not really expecting it. Now, when it comes to Long Island and the Cape Cod area off Massachusetts, those are wild cards because you never know if the system is going to head up that way before recurving and maybe heading into the Canadian Maritimes. You got Nova Scotia up there, you got Newfoundland. So it could affect one of those areas, recurving, which includes Long Island and or Cape Cod. So I never want to rule those areas out. So if you're watching from those areas, be ready. Any hurricane season you get it. I'm not thinking the Northeast this year because they just got hit last year. Very unlikely for them to get hit 2 years in a row. Bermuda, that's a wild card too because in any given year they get these recurvatures out there. Yeah.
Mark Davis is alerting us to nasty weather in about 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay, I don't think you can pull a radar up on that.
I find that interesting.
Yeah, well,
that's the emergency management guy.
Okay, well, we actually had some severe storms when Bill and I were eating dinner a little while ago, and they went just to our west and south, but I don't know. We have to pull up a radar here.
We'll do that in a minute once we're done.
Yeah. All right. You want to go back to studio cam here and let's take some.
We're flying with let's give out the phone number.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're flying with emails here too. I'm getting slammed. They're flooding in here. I'll let you look at them. It's bill@hurricanecity.com. That's bill@hurricanecity.com, and I'm going to put it back on the main screen so you can click through them. There you go. As we go back to studio cam and
let me get that for you. Spin around the other way.
Try not to run over any tools.
Okay, watch the feet, bud, because I don't want to be Donald Duck before the season starts.
All right, I think I'm pretty good.
Don't knock over our lights. Not that they're that good anyway.
Life isn't perfect, but we got it, ladies and gentlemen. We're good.
All right, watch, you're killing me over here. I'm going to get that bag back out in a minute. All right, back up a little. You got a little more room to back up. There you go. Park that thing in there like a semi-truck backing into Walmart. All right. Okay, did you want to read the emails? How are you going to read them from over here?
I really can't. I move. I'm going to let you in there. You read faster than I do.
All right, you want me to read them?
We've got a bunch of them in there.
Well, then we got to rotate. We got to switch positions.
I'll fly. I'll let you in here.
All right, let me get over here.
And I'll run your. You have any more images that you want?
Now we're gonna have a nice bird's nest.
No, we're not.
All right.
There, get in there. I can handle it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tools
Live
Central.
TV.
We've got things everywhere. We're still trying to set everything up, but we're making it work. I mean, things are flying, and some of the emails are long. Look at that.
Oh, there's a lot of emails in here. Again, that email address, bill@hurricanecity.com. And I'll go ahead and read them out here. Let's see. Why am I not getting a dope in here? Oh, there it is.
Oh, it's been more.
What about Nova Scotia? Are we going to be affected by tropical storms or hurricanes? Because you usually do get one every year, but are we going to be affected? And this is from Lucas. I guess he's up there in Nova Scotia. Although it's got a California email, a CA address.
No, that can be maybe abbreviated for Canada.
Oh, yeah, for Canada, duh. Yeah, I'm thinking California. What am I thinking? Life.ca.
Whatever,
All right.
man.
Okay. Nova Scotia. You know, that's another area that really.
Look at the tracks on the map here. I mean, we can use that to illustrate the map. No, we went away from it. Never mind. It's possible that you could get something recurving.
Why don't you turn around there so you can face the audience?
Oh, jeez. Can they? Oh yeah, turn around.
Here, let me get out of your way so you can rotate.
This is.
Yeah, you're good. Keep going. Just stay where you're at. That's
I'm
good.
not going to move anymore.
All right.
Okay,
Nova Scotia. I have an observer, Margie, up there in Nova Scotia. She always gives me all the weather reports up in Nova Scotia, and they get a lot of these systems that are brushing. You know, Sable Island, Nova Scotia gets hit a lot. They're like in one of the top. In fact, they're in the top 4. I think they're in the top 10 most affected areas in the Atlantic Basin. Sable Island. Now, the reason for that is that's a tiny island that is south of Nova Scotia. It's only like a mile wide, about 30 miles long, and it gets hammered by all these recurvatures. Their systems are all recurving, heading out into the ocean. Just south of Nova Scotia. So they get a lot of these systems just south recurving on out. But really for Nova Scotia to get hit, it's kind of a difficult scenario, kind of like Long Island, where you got the recurvature scenario. It has to be boxed in between a high to the east and a high to the west, or a trough moving in, butting up against a high-pressure ridge, and forcing it almost due north in there, like Hurricane Jose. That did a lot of damage up in that area. But it's again, that's a wild card area. The Canadian Maritimes are always a wild card because you have the recurvature scenario, and there's not really patterns. The Northeast and the Canadian Maritimes are so hard to predict. I mean, it's just, I say it every year. I did not have Long Island last year. I don't believe in my top 5. I don't think they were in the top 20.
I don't think they were there either.
So it's really hard to pick those areas. Long Island North, or anywhere up in the Northeast, to include the Canadian Maritimes, almost impossible. So I really wish I had an answer for you. All I can say is you can get significant hurricanes up there. You can get significant storm surge. I think when Jose hit up there, I might have Juan. I'm sorry, Juan. We're talking about stereotypes. Just throw up any old names.
No, it is Juan.
Okay, Juan. It was Juan, and they had like a 6-foot storm surge in Halifax. I remember that water was just piling up in there, so they can get storm surge up in there. I don't know what to tell you about this year. Anything is possible. Be careful up there. Not real high this hurricane season on the Northeast because of the fact that they get hit when there's more active hurricane seasons overall, and I'm expecting a slow season with a lot of close-to-home development in the United States. So I don't think we're going to see them out in the open ocean, heading towards Bermuda. We might see a couple like that. So it's always possible to keep track in the Canadian Maritimes. So I hope I answered your question. I really just don't have an answer for you on that one. I really wish you had a swivel chair. This is impossible.
It's the carpet, man. Sorry.
Okay, we're still checking our emails here.
Computer's a little slow.
Bill
with us.
Yeah, we're with the old dinosaur computer in here that we're replacing tomorrow. Here's an email from Brian Thorough.
I think I read that when he asked about Central Florida.
Why are there so many? Okay, we already answered that question.
No, that was the Central Florida one.
Again, that email, bill@hurricanecity.com. Normally it'd be jim@hurricanecity.com, and I'm not in front of my mail at the moment. Here's an email from Cameron Johnson.
That's the Central Florida one.
Okay. Does it look like East Central Florida will see a major hurricane this year? I know this could probably be a more of a homegrown threat this year, but the Gulf of Mexico is boiling right now and is almost at the same pattern as it was in 2005. You guys do a great job informing everyone about the threat of hurricanes. Thanks, Cameron Johnson in Daytona Beach. Daytona Beach was my wild card this year. Not a wild card. It made the honorable mention. Almost cracked the top 20.